Well, that's a very good question. In my view, I don't believe that actually risks to supply chains are growing. But what has happened over the last 10 years or so is that supply chains have become a lot less resilient than they were. And this is all to do with the amount of inventory which is being held in supply chains. A lot of supply chains, a lot of manufacturers and retailers have gone down the road of lean inventory supply chains. Now this means that they are far more at risk. If, for example, they are relying on a product either to a production line or to a store, and that product doesn't arrive, then you're going to have major operational difficulties, whether that's a production line going down or whether that's going to be a stock out in terms of in the retailing environment. So because they're keeping so little inventory now, any disruption which occurs within the supply chain can actually be business critical. Absolutely. And I think in the last 3 years we've seen some major natural disasters which have really caught the public attention, and global media is having its own impact on that. But we've seen the Japanese tsunami, for example, the floods in Thailand, we've seen Superstorm Sandy in the US. And all these are bringing these level of natural disasters and catastrophes in terms of supply chain to public awareness. But more than that, it's actually having a major impact on manufacturers and retailers. And supply chain managers are now taking this issue and raising it in profile up to board level, which is very important in terms of supply chain strategy. Now, the reason why it's important is that previously, many board level, these strategic decisions were not being made. They were being seen in terms of logistics costs, which were being driven down. But now these major disasters, which have had a major impact on supply chains, in particularly in the supply chain strategy terms, they are being seen as far more important and are getting this level of exposure. It's going onto the company agenda, and now much more is being done these days. Let me give you an example. For example, during the Japanese tsunami, Ford and a number of other motor manufacturers, they were very, very reliant on one single source, which was in terms of pigment for the painting their cars. Now, none of them realized that they were all reliant on this single source, which meant that they couldn't produce cars colored in black. Since then, since it became an industry-wide issue, they've actually addressed this by diversifying the number of suppliers that they use, actually increasing their visibility for tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. So yes, it's become much more of a strategic issue for them. Yes, they are changing, and again this comes back to the increasing profile of supply chain risk at a board level. This is something which is seen as a business critical issue now. In the past, companies have been very wary about spending money on making their supply chains more resilient because they couldn't see the immediate benefit. But when their supply chains have been so disrupted by these natural disasters or by other catastrophes that we've seen, that means that executives are far more willing to spend money now. Absolutely, and I think this is something that will become a growing issue in years ahead. Climate change, we believe, is occurring, and that's going to have impact on weather conditions, meteorology, climatic events, including the level of storms, for example. And now a lot of transport infrastructure is, in the developed world, is built along coasts. And this is particularly the case in the USA, for example, but also in Western Europe. We've seen that in the storms that we had over the winter that the rail infrastructure was very badly affected. At Dawlish, for example, where the railway ran along the side of the sea, the foundations of the track were washed away. Now, this is only going to get worse if, as the authorities, the experts say, that the storms get worse as well. So we could see road and rail really being affected in the years ahead, which means that the planners have to take this into account when they are planning future transport infrastructure projects. If sea levels do rise, for example, that means that the bridges are going to have to rise. Road and rail track will have to be designed with this in mind. So this is something that for planners to take into account. Now, if we look at the developing world, that is something which is going to have an immediate impact because sea levels have already been seen to rise there. And in a lot of cases, for example, Bangladesh, rising sea levels, level of flooding, level of storms increasing will have very, very severe impact on transport infrastructure.